Hey everyone, Mary here. So many of you know of the situation where a person is working full time for a company. They have picked up a side hustle, passion project, part time that they work on, and they have hopes of making that into a full time endeavor someday. And to be honest, that was a pretty common phenomenon post pandemic, still remains to be. However, what if you're in the opposite situation? That is, you're a business owner, or perhaps you've been working independently as a freelancer for some time now, and you've decided that it's time to trade all of that in for regular employment for an organization. This kind of transition, many people think isn't that big a deal. It's pretty easy, but it is trickier than it seems. And this video is going to talk about some of the tips that you need to do to make this transition successfully. Okay, so for my first tip, it's basically advice that I would give anyone, regardless of their employment status or situation, if they're looking for a new professional opportunity. And basically, it's to really get clear on what your expertise is, what you bring to the table, and be able to master telling that story to other people. So the thing is, when I've worked with business owners, independent consultants, as they're trying to make this transition back into regular employment, a lot of them tend to focus on strengths that is not necessarily expertise. And what I mean by that is, you'll find a lot of independent workers talk about how they've been able to juggle many things at once and not beyond their core area of what they're trained in or what their expertise in. They've also had to be involved very deeply with all aspects of a business. What I often hear is that people cite that they can handle many tasks as their expertise. And this is not really the best way to go if you're looking for full time regular employment. The reason is that it's better to have targeted and focused knowledge than it is to be a jack of all trades. And the reason is because full time roles, they serve a specific function in most cases. You're going to be part of a marketing team, or you're going to be part of, the HR systems team. It's great if you've been able to do all these other things, but really companies are wanting to make sure that you can contribute in the specific function that they're hiring for well and quickly. So I would recommend that you really sit down and think about what those core areas are, of where you really shine. You shouldn't have more than 3 areas to list as your area of expertise. In fact, many people just have 1 or 2 areas because this is where they can directly add value quickly with an organization. Okay, so the second tip that I would share is that when your experiences that you've had professionally, you're looking at the opportunity via the job description at a company and filling in that gap that exists between the two. So the trick is that this gap that exists between the two, you actually have to state it in a way that is relevant and compelling. You're not just showing that you're qualified for a role, but you're showing that you're going to be the best choice. And the employer should bet on you because the argument that you're making about your experience and all the things that you bring to the table is just that good. This is an area where I really find many candidates struggle. I mean, I don't want to say struggle in a bad way. I think they're fine, but they really could be doing a lot more in bridging that gap. A lot of times people are talking about how they're qualified, they meet the requirements, this and that. That doesn't do a good enough job to bridge that gap. You actually have to show that indeed you're probably the best choice for the position. And there are a lot of ways that people can go about doing that. Where I've seen the most direct way is that people do all the research to get it done. They not only look at the job description and identify where they're really strong in matching to what the company is looking for, but they also go a step further and really understand what the company is all about, what services or things they're building, what audiences do they serve, what kind of products and things are they doing for society, what is the impact. And successful candidates really create a narrative that combine all of those elements beyond just what's stated in the job description. So an example that I'd like to give is that I was working with a client a few months ago. You know, he had come primarily from experience in the healthcare sector as an employee, had gone off on his own doing something completely different as a business, doing franchise work, that sort of stuff. He decided to trade that in and wanted to get back into more of a coaching capacity. And from that, you know, he was showing all of the skills that he had acquired as, you know, as a business owner, but he made no mention of all this experience that he had in industry. The prospective company was actually in healthcare as well. And the thing is like that gives him such a leg up having that previous experience, even though it is from a little while ago. So we worked a bit together to tailor his responses and the experiences that he was using to show that he could really, you know, he knows the people, he knows the audiences the organization is serving because he's using the terminology. He's very familiar with the operations. He can use the speak that people who are hiring in this organization are most familiar with. So you definitely want to show that as an area to make your pitch compelling. So a third thing to consider if you are looking to transition from independent work back into regular employment is that you will constantly be asked, you know, why? Why are you looking to get back into this kind of work where you're no longer the boss, but rather, you know, you want to work for someone else? And it's really important to echo your commitment to this kind of work, as well as provide a good reason why you're seeking this kind of employment situation. We'll say that not every organization really embraces this kind of transition. Some companies are more traditional, that a lot of their recruiting teams or hiring teams, the people who make decisions, they're only familiar with seeing people who've been on a W-2 regular employment track their whole life. And anything that deviates from that is foreign, or they think you can't do it, or you're motivated by something else. You know, that's not necessarily true, but there are organizations out there that aren't as limited in their perspective. It's important to do that research and see where those organizations are. You also have to do your job as a job seeker to be prepared for this answer, because the back half of these questions about your motivation to work in this environment is whether or not you're going to, you know, be able to adapt to the rules, you know, listen to those in charge. You know, there's constantly a fear that people who come in from an independent work style and are part of a team, that they're going to go off and do things on their own and not listen to authority. So you want to make sure that you are prepared to address these issues with a strong response. Number 4 that I'll share with you is really more of a comment. I know that when there are people who have successfully transitioned from their independent work into regular employment, they do still continue what they did as their own business, but maybe, you know, on a part-time basis. Be aware that when you work full-time for an organization, many of them do require like a non-compete or a disclosure situation of all of the activities and places that you're currently working in or working on, be it from your own interest or volunteer work. You're going to be required to talk about that and volunteer that information. And when you are working with a company, depending on the company, they might have certain rules of what you can and cannot do if you are employed full time by the organization. So be aware that you would be required to do that. It has taken a few people by surprise once they've made that transition back in, that they've been asked to give up what they're doing on the side or part-time, even though it was full-time at one point and now it's not. There's a lot of questions about where a person's focus and emphasis is on, and organizations fully have that right to ask for that. So if you've made this kind of transition, I would love to hear what's worked for you. If you're currently making this kind of move, what are you struggling with? What are you encountering? Would love to hear from you. Feel free to comment below, or you can send me a message.